What's up, everybody? My name is Shannon, and I am still waiting for my Satyr, and you guys have been asking for this, so I am finally here to give it to you. Let's talk about the reading order of Phase 2 of The High Republic. I have talked about this on my podcast, Lipstick and Lightsabers, and I've also talked about it here and there as I've been reviewing the books, but this is going to be like my official, this is the way that I think you should read the books, and here's the thing. I feel very strongly about this reading order. If other people have different opinions, that is fine, but from my experience reading the books, and I read them in a completely different order, I truly do think that this is the way that will make the most sense, and this is the way that will give you the most weight going into Phase 3. Now, of course, couple of things. So I have read all of the adult novels, all of the middle grade books, all of the YA books, and then I also read the comic run for this as well, which is only 10 issues. The first one was 15 issues because it was 3 parts. This phase is only 2 parts, so it was 10 issues. So it's very doable. If you are not reading everything, that's fine. You don't actually have to read everything. In fact, I honestly think that what is the most important here is the audio drama, which is The Battle for Jetta by George Mann. That is super important, especially bridging the 2 waves within Phase 2. And then I also think it's the YA books. This time around, those 2 YA books, Path of Deceit and Path of Vengeance, are where you are getting so much information, and that's where I really think it's going to make a difference going into Phase 3. Of course, we haven't gotten Phase 3 yet, but just from judging by the titles and the emotions and things like that, I really do think it's those YA books that are holding the most weight right now. Also, with Phase 1, normally you read them in release order, which tended to be adult middle grade YA, which for the most part was absolutely true. Sometimes there were a couple things here and there that didn't really work like that. The problem with Phase 2 is that releases got pushed and it made them come out of order, which is already a problem, but then also it doesn't follow that same adult middle grade YA trend at all. In fact, I think it follows middle grade YA adult in both of our phases. So if you are reading everything, you really do start with Hidden City by George Mann. Now, Quest for the Hidden City is not my favorite. In fact, it's probably my least favorite out of all of our books from Phase 2. And at the time, I was like, you don't need this. It's not really important. You are introduced to Sunshine Dobbs, which he is a very important character later on. But as a whole, it's not really about him. I felt like you could skip it. However, as I read more books down the line, I was like, okay, no, you do need to learn about these young Padawans within this book. So you start with Quest for the Hidden City. From there, you move on to Path of Deceit by Justina Ireland and Tessa Gratton. This book is so good. It's one of the best YA books that Star Wars has put out. I really, really loved it. And this is where you're learning, like, oh my gosh, Path of the Open Hand. This is the precursor to the Nile, or is it the precursor to the Nile? They do a lot of similar things, but they act very differently. This just seems like, you know, a peace and love kind of cult hanging out on Dalna, and they're within this region of Erim and Irono. They're locked in a forever war, but they're just kind of vibing. They're hanging out by themselves, but they hate the Jedi. They hate the Jedi because they don't like the way that the Jedi use the Force. So the fact that this book centers around a cult member whose last name is Ro, might I add, and a Jedi was just amazing. 10 out of 10. Beautiful. Now this book does kind of like shepherd you into Convergence by Zoraida Cordova. This is the adult novel. This one is also not my favorite, and I think that kind of comes down to 1, the way that it was marketed, and 2, just the fact that this is introducing you to so many people, so many things, so much politics. It's the same as Light of the Jedi. Like, it's just a lot to kind of get into. Now, I do think that this book was marketed to make you think that this was the story about like a Jedi bodyguard and the son of a senator, and it is, but they are more of like the secondary type characters, whereas our primary look is at Princess from Erim and Irono that is locked in this forever war. They come together, they have a marriage of convenience, which is wonderful to kind of bring about this peace. And I do like all of these tropes put together, but it just read a little bit dry. There was a little bit too much going on. I wish it had a little bit more of like a new adult or a young adult lean, but for the most part, it was a really interesting book and I did like it. I just don't think it had has the weight that the YA books do when it comes to the story overall. Now, you read all of that, and then you move into like my between waves, right? Because we have 2 waves within phase 2. And I think after you read this, because where it leads off is going to Jetta and the peace treaties and all of that. But before you get into the audio drama, which is when lots of things happen, if you're going to read the comics, this is where you read the first 5 issues. High Republic 2022 run by Kevin Scott. The first 5 issues kind of situate you in Jetta with our different Jedi there, with the different like convocations of the Force going on here. And you're also learning that there's somebody stealing a bunch of stuff, which you kind of know where that might be going if you have read the YA books. You're like, okay, interesting. And then you read the audio drama, and the audio drama is where everything falls apart. If you don't read the audio drama, you really miss so much that bridges these 2 waves, because everything is great at the end of wave 1, and then you get into wave 2 and you're like, oh no, everything fall apart. So you do need to read The Battle for Jetta by George Mann to bridge those gaps. Now, if you are reading the comics, this is now where you read the last 5 comics, because that is going to lead you very nicely into the young adult books. So I read Path for Vengeance and I was like, oh man, they spoiled the comics. And they kind of do, but the comics weren't exactly out yet, but you get to see it from another perspective. So if you're reading the comic, read the second 5 after you listen to the audio drama. Getting into wave 2 of phase 2 of the High Republic, you start with Quest for Planet X. Now, again, I don't think it's like super important, but you need to have read Quest for Hidden City to understand who these Padawan are in this Quest for Planet X. You don't actually go to Planet X in this book, but Planet X is very important. What you need from this book is understanding the communication breakdown that's going to be happening later on. We're going to see this huge battle, and what makes it so devastating is that the communications have basically completely been tampered with, and this is where you see that happening. So that's why you need this middle grade book thrown in there. Now, again, if you're just wanting the big strokes, Path of Vengeance is the book of phase 2 of the High Republic. Questions are answered. You learn so many things. Secrets are revealed. I am in love with this. Kevin Scott should be writing more YA, because this was amazing. Like, I loved Path of Deceit. I think it's one of the best YA books that Star Wars has ever done. This is the best YA book that Star Wars has ever done. And the ending of it literally had me like clutching my pearls and going, oh my God, I need phase 3 now, because that is just how powerful this book was. However, you are getting one side of the battle for Dalna. You get the rest of it within Cataclysm, which is by Lydia Kang. I don't really love Cataclysm all too much. It's kind of my same thing with Convergence. I just felt like we didn't get to live with the characters as much as I wanted, but you do see the rest of the battle within this. You learn more about different Jedi that are on this planet and things like that. But the big thing is at the end, the way that this book ends off is very clearly handing the baton to phase 3 with the way that it ends. And you do get one big revelation at the end of the book, but we talked about it on Lipstick and Lightsabers, and both of us were like, you had to read all of this just for this one thing, just to learn this one thing, and that's why everything happened. But to make a long story short, if you want to read everything, you go Hidden City, Path of Deceit, Convergence, the High Republic's comics 1 through 5, Battle for Jetta, High Republic's comics 6 through 10, Planet X, Path of Vengeance, Cataclysm. If you want to pick and choose, if you're like, I just want broad strokes, I want to be ready for phase 3, then you read Path of Deceit, Battle for Jetta, Path of Vengeance. Those are the 3 heavy hitters. If you want more details, then you read the other things. Personally, I think I liked phase 1 better, but that's just because I was super invested in those characters. But this phase does have some of my favorite books, so it's a little bit kind of mixed in there. I am really excited for phase 3 though. I am excited to see like how everything's gonna wrap up and what note they're going to leave it on, because this initiative was like so insane to me. So I know they have to have some tricks up their sleeve, considering that this initiative is getting ready to end in the next couple of years. So if you have any thoughts about this or anything to add, please let me know in the comments down below. I hope you guys enjoyed this video. I hope it was helpful, and I will see you guys next time. Bye.